Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Only Land Fan Show. My name is Kendall Lejeune, and our guest today is Eddie Speed. Eddie Speed knows how to architect a deal like the back of his hand. For almost 40 years, he has purchased more than 40,000 notes, and the Note School executive team has bought $3.5 billion in notes. Since 1980, Eddie Speed has dedicated his professional life to the seller financing and non-performing note industry. Over the years, he has introduced innovative ideas and strategies that have positively impacted the way the industry operates today. He has been a leader and innovator in the note business for over 30 years, and he will tell you that those 30 plus years have prepared him for the incredible opportunities of this current real estate market. Eddie, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm so excited to have you on. You are an absolute titan in the industry. And so we are honored and excited to have you join us today.
Thank you.
So let's jump right in. Let's talk about how you got started in doing land deals, specifically with notes.
I started, when we say 30 years in the business, actually, that's a very liberal, very conservative number. I already started in the industry in 1980.
Wow.
So that's over 4 decades. And so I've been a note buyer. I started out as a note buyer in the 80s because of high interest rates. And over the years, there became certain types of property that were more frequently where people created notes or paper, right? And one of those, of course, is land. And so I bought now over 2,000 portfolios of seller finance notes. And I would say at least 50% of those have been on land. So back in various eras, the first most common land notes that we saw were mobile subdivisions, and some of the guys that were the biggest operators in the business became my clients. So I had one client I bought over 5,000 land notes from.
Wow.
But I ended up partnering with people. I'd work on a portfolio of land notes, and a lot of times in different eras, land is bankable, and in other eras, land is not bankable. As we see tightening of credit with the banks, which we're seeing drastic direction in that at the moment, then all of a sudden land becomes illiquid because the banks aren't working with you to finance it, right? 2 years ago, the banks were jumping out of an airplane to loan you money on land. And we weren't generating as much seller financing because people with good credit could go borrow money at the land bank and get 4% rates. And we weren't wanting to loan money at 4%. So that's the era how I got started. I've done a lot of Texas deals in a lot of areas in Texas. I did a whole lot in South Texas, south of San Antonio. I did a lot in Eagle Pass. I've done them in Carrizo Springs. I've done them in Uvalde. And most of these were people that were selling land tracts for people for future retirement. There's a class of land that I call worthless land. It's a lot of these old subdivisions. They're 50, 60-year-old subdivisions and stuff. And they're old developments that just never came to fruition. And I'm not a fan of that kind of land because I find that those people don't really ever do anything with it. I like dealing in land that people are going to enjoy and do something with. But that's how I got started dealing in land. I've been doing it for over 30 years now in land stuff. And I have an active land business with a partner up in Nocona, which is northwest of Dallas.
Excellent. That is fantastic. What a wealth of knowledge and such a rich history in the land business. And so, can you talk a little bit about what types of land deals do you specialize in today?
Mobile subdivisions are what we did. We bought a lot of paper on mobile subdivisions. And that is not necessarily what we're necessarily. I tell people I'm not really a land developer. I'm just a land reaggregator. Now, for tax reasons, that actually means a lot. Okay, but I like buying country land and breaking them into tracts. I've done it a lot. I've done it in multiple states and multiple partners, and I just have found that's a good business. I always start out with I want desirable land. So we buy pretty land up in the country, and we'll buy 300 acres, 500 acres, whatever it may be, and we break them into tracts. And sometimes they're 10-acre tracts, sometimes we've done 40-acre tracts. But we want to make sure that the land has the things on it that people are going to need. And if they don't have it, we want to make sure that they know that. Does it have water on it? Does it have power to it? Does it have access? And we found with land, most land that we end up buying is what I call abandoned land. So people inherited the land, a lot of inheritance, and now you got 3 siblings. 2 of them live in Dallas. 1 of them lives in Houston. They hadn't been to the farm in 10 years. That's our kind of deal. And we're pretty prone to get them to carry terms.
Excellent.
Get them to carry the financing.
That's fantastic. So you're creating notes on the front end when you buy the property. And are you also creating notes on the back end when you sell the property as well?
Every time we can. Some of the land that we've done is so nice that it's hard for us to carry seller financing, right? Because they show up and they're from California and they're driving a $80,000 pickup and they just want to go buy 30 acres from us. And we've done 5-acre tracts and 10-acre tracts, and they want to go buy 6 contiguous tracts and pay cash. So we try to do that if we can, but we would love to carry terms every time we can. We always ask ourselves, like when we're getting the seller to carry terms, we always try to think in terms of what's our exit, right? If our exit is we're going to sell land for cash, then really seller financing is just temporary. Unless you can take the mortgage, which is at really soft terms, and go put it on another piece of property, what we call walk the mortgage.
Interesting.
And so we've done a lot of things like that. I had a coaching student on a deal lab this week that literally that's exactly what we did. He had some land in Abilene. He's going to sell it. It's going to sell for cash, and he knows it. So we made sure he put a substitution of collateral clause, walk the mortgage. And that way he can take the mortgage that's on that property that's very favorable terms, very favorable, like 0% interest.
Wow.
And go move that mortgage from the original property to another property.
Oh, that is a very cool strategy. That's very cool. I think that's one of the beautiful things about creating terms is that the only limitation is like your creativity, right? There's so many different opportunities to be creative. Walking it back, taking a look at what you actually like to use in terms of terms when you're buying with the seller. So can you talk to us about what some of your criteria or what some of the type of terms that you like to lock in when you're doing that on the buy side?
If I were a lawyer, I would not be a doc in the box lawyer. If I were a CPA, I wouldn't be a doc in the box CPA. So I'm not a doc in the box guy. The first thing I do is listen to the customer.
Right.
I'm sitting there seeing Brad on my screen, right? So here's the thing. The customer, what's the percentage chance the customer needs no money up front? It's a fairly low percentage shot. Okay. So the guy needs 30% down. Okay. Then if I'm going to give him 30%, I've already paid for that part of the land. What does that mean, Eddie? You paid for that part of the land. I'm going to give him 30% down, and he's going to release that portion of the property. And then I can borrow the money from Brad, and I still got nothing in it. So the guy got 30% down. It just wasn't my dollars. It was Brad's dollars. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And so there's a lot of things like that. You have to listen to the customer. If you're like, listen, if you're going to buy country land, you're going to see a lot of inherited properties. I can already tell you what the deal is. 2 of them have money, and 1 of them has broke and is looking for a check immediately. 3 siblings, 2 of them got money. They're fine. They don't really even want to sell the property because mama and daddy owned it. The 3rd one is broke and desperate for something. Okay. Then if I get them to seller finance it, guess what I'm going to do with the desperate one? I'm going to buy their note at a discount. that's the kind of thing that you can't just, what are great terms, right? So I'm going to give you a couple of this, like I've helped people structure, I'm going to safely say in the past 5 years, I've structured probably 10,000 real estate investor deals on terms.
Wow.
Because I have a coaching business and I help a lot of people do it. Okay. So let me give you some almost guarantees of what people will do every time. First question is, can somebody seller finance? Most people say it the wrong way. Would you carry terms? Well, what are they going to say when you carry terms?
What does that mean?
No, we really want cash. Why they said that? Because they couldn't equate to why that even made sense to them. So the first thing you have to do is figure out how big is the wolf at their door. How much money do they actually really need today? You start there. And then you have to say something that's logical to them, that sounds like taking terms is smart. It's got to seem smart to them. They already think you're smarter than them about this subject, right? You're the pro. You're the person that does this all day, every day. They don't do this all day, every day. And so they're it's like going to the car dealership. You're going to edge a little bit because you think they're going to outsmart you a little bit, right? Because you're in their card game now. And by the way, the car dealership probably is going to outsmart you. Everybody thinks the money in the car dealership is the price that they charge you for the car versus what they have in the car. Let me just tell you this, at a Ford store, at a Chevrolet store, that profit is about $1,600. The profit in the finance department is close to $4,000.
Wow.
You did all the negotiating way back there, and then you walked in the finance department, you thought the negotiations was over, and then that's when they tallywhacked you.
That's when the big guns come out.
And I'm telling you, any big car store in the country, that's how it works. So their profit is in the finance department. Their profit is not necessarily in the other department, because now we have the internet and anybody can figure out what something costs. And you got to do is go create a bidding war with other car dealerships and this and that. Now, some cars there's a shortage of, and they whatever. If you want a rafter pickup truck, apparently they're going to make 10, 15, 20 grand on you, and that's just how it is. But most of this stuff now, let me give you an example. There is a serious oversupply of pickups. And between now and the end of the year, they're about to give them away. But of course, when you get the finance department, they're going to make big money on you. They're just not going to tell you how they did it.
Got it.
So that's how I look at it. If you're going to do creative financing, you've got to know how to approach a customer. So here's what I like to say. So Kendall, there's kind of two ways that you can sell your land. And you got to go pick what's smart for you and makes the most sense. Some people will do a furniture store model sale. I'm waiting for you to say, what is that?
What is that?
Okay. You've seen the furniture stores, right?
Yeah.
A lot these big furniture stores, what do they offer when you go buy furniture from them? What do they always make sure that you know that they can do? Don't they always make sure that you know that they can finance you?
Yes.
Why do you think they do that?
So I know that I can pay in payments.
Do you think they make money on it?
Yeah.
Do you think they're smart?
Yes.
So some people have figured out selling land, they can be smart like the furniture company. Just because you get paid tomorrow doesn't mean you don't make good money. So a lot of times people will have a cash price because they need all the money now. And some people are in a position like the furniture companies to make what can turn out to be a very smart decision for them to wait on part of the money and finance it later. Now, how do you feel about a creative offer?
If I can make money, then
you see, it's framing. What I did is I framed it to sound like a smart decision. Most people don't approach it that way. And they're like, hey man, would you carry the financing? That almost sounds like you're a little bit desperate.
Like, I
So,
can't do this deal unless you carry the financing. So it gives them the leverage and the power in the decision.
and so then you're saying, well, how would that work? Now I have a little more truth serum where they might tell me what their true immediate cash needs are.
Ah, okay.
You say the more cash you get today, the lesser the price. The more cash you can wait for and get tomorrow, it's going to help us on paying more for the land. Just think in terms of if you don't need a lot of immediate cash and you really would like cash flow, because the land's never made you any money. It's not like a rent house. This would let you take your land deal and turn into the bank and get a check every month, not a bunch of aggravation, and get rewarded for it. You see what I'm saying? I'm now saying things to them that they would have never thought of that.
And it makes total sense.
You ever go buy a computer or an appliance or anything, and the sales guy tells you all these things that you would have never thought of, right? Okay, that's what a salesman's job is.
Ah, very good.
They don't know this. They don't think about it. I've been thinking about this for almost 45 years.
Absolutely.
So it's my job to point out things to them that are a benefit to them that they would have never considered. Right? Now, why do I use a furniture company analogy? Couldn't I use a used car dealership? Couldn't I use other vendors that will carry financing on what you buy from them? Why do I not like using those examples and I love using the furniture example?
I know a lot of people have probably bought furniture on terms.
Okay. And what does the furniture company usually offer about their financing?
I've seen
they have a period of time where it's no money.
No money down. Yep.
No, not necessarily no money down. A period of time where you don't make payments.
No payments.
And
yeah,
a period
no
of time that you don't pay any interest. Okay. So I want to use an analogy that they already think they're smart. And it's not going to sound weird that I'm not going to want to start immediately paying you. And it's not going to sound weird that if I'm going to pay you interest, that's going to be down the road. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I very tactically am using an analogy that I'm going to play back to them that I like that how that analogy is structured for me. So the first thing I would say to you is most people will do a step rate loan. Most sophisticated people will do a step rate loan. Most people do not know how interest is earned or calculated. I bought 50,000 notes. If I ask most people that I'm buying a note from, what's their interest income for the next 18 months, unless they're somebody like Brad and do it for a living and a big scale, they can't freaking tell you. And I know that. So I have learned that people will do no interest or very low interest. And as the loan goes, I can step up the interest rate. So here's the math trick. I'm paying low interest on the highest principal and high interest on the very low amount of principal. But I can make people's greed glands, that's your greed gland right there. See that? I can make people's greed glands swell up because I'll offer them 6 or 8% interest on the backside of the loan when I've paid the principal down by 80%. And you're saying, Eddie, nobody will go for that. No, almost everybody will go for that.
Interesting. And how do you frame it? Because we're talking about framing. How do you frame that specific component?
You say, for it to work for me, you got to be in a position to finance it at less than the bank, right? Because if I pay cash, I can borrow money from the bank. But right now they're charging high interest rates. So you will allow me to pay you more if you will finance it at below bank rates. But if you carry it for a longer period of time, you're probably going to want to earn higher interest. What do you think they're going to say?
Yeah.
They're going to say yes. So then what you do is you do a deal like you do 2% and 3% and 4%, and you change the rate every so many years, say 3 or 4 years. But your effective interest rate is way weighted towards the lower end of the interest that you've paid. And I've learned that is probably the most effective strategy that I've taught people how to do over and over. I told you about a land deal that a coaching student brought to me this week, and he's buying at 0% interest. But guess what the guy wants? He wants a 5-year balloon. I don't want a 5-year balloon. So see, that's the trade-off. He got him to agree to 0% interest. I would have gone for a step rate, and on year 10 or year 12 or year 15, I might agree to pay him 6% interest. Okay, if I don't want to pay 6% interest, just pay the loan off. Make it your own balloon. Yeah. Here's another trick. I want to structure the deal where I know there's a very high chance that I'm going to buy my own note at a discount at a future date. Okay. I bought 50,000 seller finance notes. Let me say that a little differently. I have beat out the borrower from buying his own note 50,000 times, because if he really knew what he was doing, he'd buy his own note at a discount.
Wow.
So do you see what I'm saying? I'm looking at it thinking the guy's going to wake up one day and want some money, and I want to buy my own note. I need to structure the option to do that where it's really tight in my favor. I've seen people structure an option to buy a note, and it said that they're going to go out and get another bid. Well, 90% of the people that are bidding on notes are a broker, and they ain't got enough money to pay attention. They're just going to go bring it to a deal, somebody like me that's actually got the money. So you're bidding against a ghost. So I put really tight provisions in there that says the buyer has to make an unconditional commitment to buy the note, and they have to have proof of funds and blah, blah, blah. Like, you can do things that say, if I'm going to bid against somebody, I'm going to bid against somebody that's actually can write a check and close, not somebody's going to go tie me up and actually couldn't close. But see, once again, like, why do I do all this? So why do I have a school, and why does all this matter? All this is just a compression of time. I'm not smarter than anybody else on this call. I am way more seasoned. I turned 64 years old today.
Today, happy birthday.
Now, my wife's out of town, and I knew that. And so I wouldn't need to race home and go have TV dinner by myself. So otherwise, I probably wouldn't have agreed to this. But I actually am. And so I've been doing this a really long time. And the thing that I can give people is a compression of time. I've already run 10,000 experiments. I've already tried to figure out every way to structure a note you can do it that's to my advantage. Every guru in the business says, oh, I'm going to show you how to create 0 interest rate notes. That's doable probably 15 or 18% of the time. I'm not saying never, but I'm saying to you that if you stay stuck on 0% interest, most people that would carry terms are going to walk away from you. So don't be scared to pay interest. It's just how you pay it and when you pay it.
That will make it work. That's brilliant. That's really good. Now, Eddie, let's say that someone is listening to this and their entire business model has always been just flipping for cash. They buy for cash, they flip for cash. They want to get into the note game, but they feel like or maybe you're not extremely great at math, or they don't know how to structure this or how to structure that, and all of the different terms, buying the note back and all of this may make them feel like maybe it's a little bit over their heads. How would you explain it to someone who is brand new, fresh into the business model of creating notes? You did a great job of explaining, listen to what the seller needs. How can someone start incorporating notes into their business today?
That's why I built a school. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck. I'm just saying to you that I built a school so I can go take what were complicated processes, and we broke down into simple steps. And that's why I built a school, right? And then to be perfectly honest with you, I have a very selfish reason I have a school, okay? I'm in the note buying business. And
Yes.
so when you structure all these notes and then you get a chance to buy your own note at a discount and you look in your checking account and you don't have enough money, you might call old Papa Eddie.
That's right.
So I have a very selfish reason that I want to teach people how to go do this successfully. But what I'm saying to you is I built a school to go sequentially through it and show people how to do it. And there's 50 things that I know to write into a note to the borrower's benefit. If I'm buying on terms, there's 50 things I can write into a note that are advantageous. Now, the truth of the matter is, you wouldn't put all 50 things in every note, right? You got to know what terms to put in what note that really matter. Like an option to buy my own note at a discount, call that number one. I'm gonna put that in every note I do. But some things that are very unique to some notes would not make sense in another note. And so people say, oh my God, what is that? That's why I built a school. I teach people what that is and I give them examples. You see how this works. In other words, nothing makes sense to anybody until we learn better. If you took somebody from 150 years ago and put them in a car that a 14-year-old can drive today, that would be super complex to them until they saw it and they saw how it worked. All we're trying to do is to say that those are things that are possible. People ask me, who is a real student for Note School? Right? So I have two sides of our business. I train active real estate investors, right? That's why you and I know common people. I've been involved in a number of high volume real estate investor masterminds, Collective Genius, Boardroom, Investor Fuel, like all of those things. Like people know me from that world. So I help real estate investors turn in from flippers to start being wealth builders. Because that's what you said. Somebody's flipping land and they want to do more than this. Business should be about building wealth. It shouldn't about being or earning transactional income only. That don't sound very exciting to me.
Here's your new job. You just keep flipping.
That's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I help people like that. And on the other side, I have a lot of people that have a 9-to-5 job. They're a doctor. They're a high volume realtor. They're a hospital administrator. They're this, they're that. And so they just have money and they want me to help them find deals. Right? So what I'm using is balancing deal flow and capital. So because people don't realize if you create notes, you're going to need to liquidate. You're going to need to get some money out of these deals. Brad has already figured out money does not grow on trees. And I don't care how good you are at it, you're going to run out of money unless you're good at financially modeling and figuring out how to restructure deals. And that's what I teach people how to do. And I use these wealthy people's money to be able to do that. Right? So there are some deals that just fall out of the sky. They want nothing down. They'll do zero interest. They'll start taking payments 2 years from now. Like it's just lights out. You couldn't ask for anything better if you're the guy borrowing the money. But most deals are not that good.
Right.
And then you're going to have to figure out how to go to do it. And that's really how we go about it. I like to start out with asking somebody like, are you willing to not just think transactionally? Are you willing to think, I'm doing this to grow my net worth? If somebody says, heck yeah, okay, well, that's a good way to start, right?
Exactly. So
it's like the basketball coach saying, are you willing to run? The kid says, no. Okay, you ain't going to play basketball. It's that.
Excellent. And so if someone's listening to this and they say, okay, I understand the concept of notes and I understand some creative financing principles and how that could benefit my flipping business. Can you talk a little bit more in depth about how creating notes actually creates wealth? Hey, land fans, looking for your tribe of serious land investors? Join thousands of your fellow land lovers in the Only Land Fans Facebook group. We're talking real deals, expert strategies, and game-changing connections you won't find anywhere else. This isn't just another real estate group. This is the community where land investors come to level up. Join us at onlylandfansgroup.com and join the conversation today. That's onlylandfansgroup.com. See you there.
You're financing the property and you're earning interest and you're doing something that is not work like owning rental properties. If I have a rent house, about 50% of the rent I collect is going to go out in expenses. Now, it may not go out next month, but about 50% of what you collect in rent is going to go out over time. Okay. But today I can sell or finance a rent house for a way bigger payment than what I rent it for. And that's just because of mortgage rates. So most people today, when they spend some time with us, most people figure out, oh my God, I could make more money on my rentals, seller financing them than I ever could renting them. And then you get the contrarian. Oh yeah, that's true, but you don't get the appreciation. And the answer is I do. I just get it today, not tomorrow.
Nice.
I'd rather get the appreciation today versus having to wait for it for 10 years. So people say, what about land? Land traditionally is the most illiquid real estate asset that most small-time real estate investors deal in. We're not building casinos here, right? We're talking about just doing, small-time real estate transactions, $500,000 or less. Okay. So if that's the case, then let me ask you a question. We've talked about two other industries, the car industry, the furniture industry. You think they make more money in buying and selling the product, or they make more money in the finance department?
Finance department.
Okay. Well, it seems like that's something I really want to dig into.
Absolutely.
So that's how it works.
Excellent. And so you mentioned earlier, when you're in the process of creating these notes, eventually at some point you do want to liquidate these notes. And you also mentioned the term buying back your notes. So for someone who may not be as familiar with that concept, can you talk about the exit and why you would want to buy back your own note?
Let's say that you've seller financed a piece of land for me, Kendall. I bought a piece of land for you for $200,000. And I'm going to pay you out over 20 years. Okay. Now you don't own 1,000 notes. You just own one note. You're getting a payment every month. And let's just say that I'm paying you $800 a month payment on the land. Okay.
Okay.
So you're going to go along about 2 years, and your accountant for the second year in a row is going to tell you that you owe income on the interest you've collected. And he's going to tell you got to pay the IRS come around April 15th. And you're going to go, oh, crap. I don't have those $800 payments. I've already spent them. So what you found is you're collecting just enough money where it doesn't matter.
If you're enjoying this episode of the Only Land Fans podcast, please let us know by subscribing and leaving a review. Now let's get back to the action.
And then you're going to figure out if you had a lump sum of money, you could go do something with that. It would be far more effective to invest a lump sum of money than invest that $800 a month. That's how I've learned this, is because I've bought so many notes from so many people, and I've drilled down into what their real life story is. And that's their real life story. So I know that they're going to wake up and want a lump sum of money one day. The odds are in my favor. And so I know that you might take a cash payoff for $140,000, $150,000 versus waiting on collecting the 200 plus interest. I bought my own debt at a discount. Does that sound like a good business?
All day. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Now, old Brad, he won't do that. Okay, I already know that. He loaned me the money and he wants all of his money back, but he's a professional lender. I'm borrowing money from amateur lenders. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a fantastic way to highlight that. Can you talk a little bit about, when we hear a lot of talk in the industry about selling the notes, like people are looking for note buyers, and there's a lot of conversation around how to create notes that are attractive for note buyers. So if someone finds themselves in a position where they know at some point they want to sell the note, what type of advice would you give to them about finding note buyers, creating relationships with note buyers, and structuring deals that may be attractive to sell at a later date?
So I bought 50,000 seller finance notes. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Right. And somebody like Brad that knows that's a lot. So why did I buy 50,000 notes? Because I ran a note manufacturing business. People like home investors, people like big land guys, big operators. They came to me and they said, if you're going to buy my notes, we don't know how to make them. Because they'd show up at my doorstep and we'd price their notes and they'd be like, oh my God, the discount's terrible. They cooked the pie wrong. They didn't make the right kind of note. They didn't know how to make a note. So one of the things that I've really tried to do is work backwards and help people with how to structure a note so that when they got ready to sell it, they didn't get slaughtered. Right? Excellent. It's not, you're not accidentally going to figure this out.
There has to be some intention.
All right. For those of you that have a pencil, let me give you 6 characteristics that influence the value of a note. Are you ready?
We're ready.
Those of you have a pencil. The first thing is the borrower, the guy that owes the money. Right? If you're not vetting the guy that you're loaning money to, I'm betting he won't vet. That's my guess. So if you're loaning money to people with bad credit, people in the note business ain't going to that deal. Second thing is your property itself. I won't buy notes on worthless pieces of property. If it's the Sandlots in Arizona or Falcon Head or Diamond Head, don't call me. I'm out. I can just tell you right now, this cowboy's done. Because I already know I done been to that rodeo. I've been bucked off that bull. I don't need any more. So the second thing is the collateral. The third thing is the buyer's equity. And that's particularly true in land because generally a note buyer wants a lower exposure on land than he does on houses. So number 3 is the buyer's equity. Number 4 are the terms of the note, the interest rate and how long it's payable. The longer a note pays, more it's going to be discounted. The lower the interest rate, the more it's going to be discounted. That's common sense, right? Number 5 is the pay history, the evidence that the loan is paying good. And number 6 is the paperwork. I'll bet you my best pair of Texas cowboy boots that a lot of people that are on here have been told, now, when you sell land, you sell on a land contract. Oh, really? Tell me about that. I've only bought 25,000 of them. I think I know a little bit about them. Why is a land contract better than a note and a deed of trust? People say, I don't have to foreclose. That's not true if you're in a state with a court of equity. And most states are a court of equity, an equitable interest in the property. And that means you have to foreclose on a land contract just exactly like you have to foreclose on a note and a mortgage. So you see, that's just a myth. So I help people like scientifically figure out how to create notes so when they need to liquidate, they don't get slaughtered. Because usually the first time they show up at my doorstep and they already got a portfolio, they feel like they need a little oxygen. Not just me, just anybody.
Sure.
And that's because they didn't scientifically know how to manufacture the product to go take it to the marketplace. They didn't make the note correctly, and they take it to the marketplace, and the marketplace doesn't like what they've created. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense.
That's how I bought 50,000 deals.
That is just fantastic. So if someone is creating lots of notes, how would you advise them to manage their notes? Are there some tips or tricks that you have found in your own note business? Do you have a note servicer, or how do you go about managing all of this?
Yeah, there's a lot of big operators in the land business that self-service. There's a lot of big operators like in Way South, Texas. I know most of them really well. I have one client that's done like 35,000 notes.
Wow.
They've got their own servicing shop. I got another client in San Antonio. They create They've created 3,000 notes. They got their own servicing shop. Most people are not positioned to run a servicing shop that well. And you just have to figure out whether you can be compliant. Just because you're selling land does not mean you're not subject to Dodd-Frank. That is also a myth. So don't go get around on these Facebook pages and let all these guys blow you up and tell you you're selling land, you're not subject to Dodd-Frank. That is a lie from the pits of hell. If it's for residential purposes, meaning they're going to build on it at a later date, it is subject to Dodd-Frank.
That's very good. That's very good.
That doesn't mean you don't do it. That just means that you do it with clarity. That means that you now know there's a speed limit through town, when otherwise, if you didn't know there's a speed limit through town, then the police officer might explain to you what that was.
Right? While he's writing your ticket.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't want that part.
We don't want that part. Yeah. So you brought up a really great point about there are lots of myths that are floating around, especially when it comes into creative financing, because there are lots of areas that can potentially be gray, especially the more complicated, the more complex deals are. So what are some of the biggest myths that you've seen or errors in thinking around the note space or creative financing and as it relates to the land industry?
Don't deal in junk land. Don't deal in junky buyers. Don't think that a bunch of homemade documentation is okay. Underwrite the buyer. You're going to loan them money. Act like you're a lender. Act like you're a lender, because that's what you are. Right? I can tell you this, that the way you market your property and offer seller financing has a lot to do with who shows up at your doorstep. So let me give you an ad. Let me give you a sign to put on your property. Private financing for deserving buyers with large down. Don't say seller financing. Why? Because seller financing to a lot of people means that's non-qualifying loan. Private financing sounds like you'd have to qualify. Okay? And so, there's two ads. There's two pieces of property side by side. One of them says bad credit, no problem. The next property says private financing for deserving buyers with large down. Who do you think is going to get the best buyer?
The second ad.
You got it.
All day. Very interesting. Talking about buyers, let me ask, and there's lots of talk right now about the market shift and market changes. And obviously we're seeing mortgage rates climb. Where do you see the market going now? And how has that affected your business?
I think it has a lot to do with what kind of land you're selling. Right? The land business has historically been the most volatile in real estate cycles. I've had land people in the last few years tell me that land is recession proof. I'm like, not in the last 45 years I've been doing it. There's certain kinds of land that become affordable housing and a thing of life. So you have to know what asset class you're in. People aren't just buying a piece of land today and they're going to make $1,000 payment every month just because they want to go have fun sometime in the future. They have to have a future plan. So I like selling land that people are going to have a future use for. They're going to retire on it. They're going to go put a mobile home on it and they're going to go live on it because he's a contractor and they don't want to graze his kids in a concrete parking lot. You got what I'm saying? There's a reason that they want to go buy the land. So I like to chase land that people have really an affinity for that land, right? So the collateral type is, you will never create good paper on junk land. I'm just telling you, if I've literally probably looked at 8,000 portfolios of land notes, I have seen some dog crap junk and it won't pay. And there's people in the industry right now that there's problems. I'm very aware of them. There are people that I don't dislike them, but I wouldn't do business with them because I knew the paper they were creating wasn't good business. So I have a passion for people doing this business. Scott Campbell, those guys down there in South Texas, he's created 35,000, 40,000 seller finance notes to people of Hispanic descent. He sells the land to people that are going to put a mobile home on it, or they're going to go build a house on it. When they're Hispanic, they'll go build a house for cash. They may have their family do it. It may take them 2 years, but they'll do it. You see what I'm saying? So he's creating a home for them through land. I love that business. That's good business.
Listen up, land fans. This is huge. We're bringing you the one and only Pace Morby, star of A&E's triple-digit flip and the mastermind behind $450 million in real estate deals. He's coming to our virtual meetup on Thursday, December 5th to share how he's applying his creative financing genius to land deals. Head to olfmeetup.com to save your spot today. That's olfmeetup.com. This is the kind of opportunity that changes everything. Excellent. You mentioned something earlier that I'd love to hear a little bit more about is the thought or the concept that land is recession proof. And you said that's not always the case. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how your experience has informed that's not always the case?
Land is a luxury item. If people are buying luxury land, it's a luxury item. In a recession, what do people cut out?
Luxury items.
They cut out vacations. They cut out the extra car to drive on the weekend. They cut out luxury things. So you have to be aware of what asset class you're dealing in. And is it a luxury item or is it an intentional item that they have a use for? If I buy a piece of land that I'm going to go retire on in 5 years, I have an intentional use for that land. Even no matter what the market is. You got what I'm saying?
Yes.
If I buy one of these old, what they call sand lots, the Arizona sand lots these were subdivisions that were created like 60 and 80 years ago, actually by the railroad. And they're all throughout the western states. What's somebody going to go do with that land? Oh, I know. They're going to do nothing with it. Because I'm looking at I can stand out on 5 acres and it looks like I own 10,000 acres because there's no house out there. You see what I'm saying? I'm just being realistic with you that there's certain things over the years that I've learned that if and this is not what the land gurus say. I know all that. I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings tonight, but I don't care because I do care.
Yes. Yes. Talking about buying land that makes good business sense, buying land that is desirable, how do you go about finding or qualifying that type of property in your own land business when you're looking to buy?
What's the end use? Who am I going to sell it to and what are they going to do with it? Ask old Brad there. Brad, you make a lot of loans on them sand lots? Because if you do, I've got some. I got 80 of them. I'd like to borrow a lot of money on
them. I love it.
He knows. You see what I'm saying? There's no use for that land. I want to buy land that is sacred to my buyer.
That's good.
And that's the truth. Now, listen, I bought a lot of land down in South Texas. Okay. And people are buying those 20-acre, 40-acre tracts. Down there, they call them ranchitos. Mm-hmm. Right? Those people are originally from Mexico or their family is from Mexico, and they want to go live as close to the border as they can without living in Mexico. And they're buying that property for future retirement. And they'll pay for it for 20 years, and they'll move back there and retire. And I've seen that business, and I know it. Now, it's rough-looking old land. Okay, it's like the old John Wayne movie. It'll sting you, stick you, or bite you. Everything down there. But it's their land, and it's their country, and it's what they want. It's not pretty land like up there in Montague County and where Nakona's at. It's not that kind of land. But it doesn't mean it's not valuable to the buyer. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You have to know the buyer.
Yeah.
That's great.
Why is it valuable to them?
Yeah, that's a really fantastic question especially when you're trying to just figure out what product you're putting on the market. Who are you dealing with? Who's your buyer? That's really good. So let me ask you, and
you're gonna have to cross out a whole bunch of chapters in them Guru land books. You know that, don't you?
And I love this.
You're pretty much wiping out some of that stuff.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. I love getting this perspective. And so let's lean into that a little bit more. What are some of the big things, in your opinion, that not many people or no one is talking about in the land industry right now that we should be talking about?
Probably compliance.
Can you dig in a little bit more to that?
Yeah, because the gurus are just wrong. And believe me, I know guys and that are the biggest guys that sell land tracts in the country, and they all know that I'm 100% right about it is subject to Dodd-Frank. You meet anybody that's ever generated 5,000 land notes that has a law firm that is trying to keep them protected where they don't get slaughtered, it is subject to, and I know I've been around things and I just have to walk away from people that are like claiming to be land gurus, and they're saying that if you're selling land, it's not subject to Dodd-Frank. It's just not true.
And so
You,
if
you don't think
someone's
them little boys down there in South Texas that have sold 10 and 20 and 30,000 lots who have law firms they paid a lot of money, you think that, why do you think that they feel like they have to be compliant and some little land guy that doesn't even have a lawyer thinks he doesn't? Does that make any sense?
no sense at all. If someone's listening to this and they're not familiar with Dodd-Frank, can you give us a quick overview of what that is and what it means to be compliant with Dodd-Frank?
Dodd-Frank basically is a law that came out. It's 88,000 pages, and seller financing got into the law. And it basically said if you do this more than 3 times in a year, you're a professional lender. So you're like Bank America. You're treated the same. You're making a loan to a consumer, not an investor. So define consumer versus investor. Residential purposes. Are they planning on occupying the land? If he's an investor, then he's a big boy. He's got his big boy britches on, and you're not subject to Dodd-Frank. If they're a consumer, even a future home consumer, that's a horse of a different color. You can't trick anybody and don't get cute and make people sign an affidavit because, wink, we're going to avoid Dodd-Frank. But if you're buying a property for investment purposes, it's not subject to Dodd-Frank because they're not going to go build a house on it or put a house on it.
Excellent. Very good. So shifting gears a little bit, Eddie, what do you consider to be your superpower?
Creative financing.
Love it.
I'm a visionary. I just take 40 plus years experience and maybe some skill that God gave me in looking down the road and seeing where there's an opportunity in the middle of a market. That's what I think I've got.
Excellent. And so looking at it through the lens of a visionary, through creative finance, one of the questions that I have for you is, we know that creative finance can unlock a lot of possibilities and opportunities for doing a deal that maybe doesn't fit the just traditional cash flip model. But yeah. Are there any deal killers for you when looking at, let's say it's a desirable piece of property, the seller wants to do a deal, creative finance can make a lot of different things happen, but what are some deal killers for you in terms of creative finance not being able to turn an opportunity into a deal?
When we say creative financing, it can be short-term or long-term financing. You can get the seller to finance it until you just get ready to flip it. Most people flipping land don't even consider that. I call it temporary seller financing, right? Now, that's not great news for Brad because he wants to loan you the money. But let me say this. So as far as when you're buying and you're creating seller financing, there's 2 different mindsets. When I'm buying and with seller financing, I'm the borrower. I want them to do the weakest lending deal they can do, not advantageous to the lender. When I'm selling, I want to do the strongest lending deal I can do, which means I want to underwrite the buyer and I want to get a lot of skin in the game and I want to make sure they can pay. I want that paper to stick, right? And so when you're saying, when does this not work? Usually is when I can't accomplish either one of those.
I see.
In other words, I have people that come to note school and they tell me some land deal and I'm buying it at 8% interest with seller financing. If you bought it for 60 cents on the dollar, that could be a good deal. If you bought it more at retail, that's not a good deal.
Yep.
So But wait a minute, maybe they're only going to borrow the money for 6 months. So maybe 8% doesn't matter. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
There's no one, like, I've already given you the thing that to stay away from, which is junk land.
Yes.
Like, if
Yep.
you stay away from junk land, that advice will be good to you. Now, some of your listeners are not going to listen to me because they've been told by, quote, experts, that's great business. But very few people have made the junk land business work. I'm very good friends with a guy that most of the gurus got the idea from him. I'm not going to say who he is because he's not trying to be public. I know him very well, right? He's done 40 or 50,000 tracks. He owner finances junk land. His default rate is about 20% a year.
Wow. Wow.
So
Yeah.
he knows that, and he baked that into his business. That's not my business. It wouldn't be it. That's not of interest to me. I like the guy personally, and he's built a machine around dealing with that. But that's why when people say, "Why do you feel that way?" That's why I feel that way, right?
Yeah.
So I like pretty land. I love creative financing techniques. You're not going to go do 100 creative finance deals and not end up dealing with a lender too. Meaning that buyer is going to have an immediate cash need at closing. That means you're going to have to be able to work hand in hand with a lender for part of that land and the seller for the other part of the land. So don't think you're never going to go deal with the seller's always going to carry all the terms up front. That's just not likely.
So can you give us an example, Eddie, of when you might use seller financing as a short-term loan to be able to get into a deal that you may not be able to use a traditional lender for the entire payment?
We bought a tract of land, and it was about 400 acres, and we were going to break them into really about 20-acre tracts. Pretty land, really pretty land. Okay, so it was between St. Joe and Nacona. Very desirable. And we knew that we were going to sell those tracts for enough money that people weren't going to go sell or finance it because they were going to go pay cash. And at the moment they could do it, they could borrow the money at the land bank and pay 4% interest, because that was a couple of years ago. So we knew up front that we were going to have to pay off the lender. But it just made more sense for us to get them to sell or finance part of the land versus us going and getting a loan at the bank. I already know what Brad wants. He wants me to personally guarantee the loan. He wants me to provide a lot of financial information. I'd really rather not do that. I love the guy. I don't want to necessarily agree to his terms unless I have to. He knows that. So that's the deal. I would rather borrow, and maybe I got a shot of buying my own note at a discount. So I would rather do that if I can. And I just would say, what I hope I've done this evening is created an awareness. You start looking at a deal through a different set of lens. Is it good property? What's my buyer going to do with it? Is he a cash buyer candidate or is he a terms buyer candidate on the backside when I sell it? So now all of a sudden we become much more aware of what a creative finance candidate even really looks like. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's fantastic. Excellent. So, Eddie, who are some of the maybe business owners, authors, thought leaders, entrepreneurs that you like to read or follow?
I say that you get paid the most by negotiating. And if you look at the real estate investing industry, Chris Voss probably has singly had the biggest impact in negotiation. So Chris Voss was, if you don't know who he is, he was a former renowned FBI hostage negotiator, and he wrote a book called Never Split the Difference. And there's a lot of people. I'm very good friends. I've helped Steve Trang on his terms buying. I've helped Jerry Green. They're friends of mine. They're brilliant guys at what they do. But you're going to, if you're trying to buy property and you're focused on numbers, you're going to cost yourself a huge amount of money. If you're buying property and you can focus on the psychological close, you're going to make a lot more money. So those are things that I think are just truths in the business. I wasn't raised originally doing the business in the 80s and the 90s. I wasn't taught that. And so it just took me 20,000 phone calls to go figure out some stuff that I think people can learn a lot faster than the way I learned it.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. So what is the biggest surprise you've had so far on your journey in the land space and in your career?
I thought there was water available.
Yes. That's so good. That is so good. I love it.
If you can't get water and utilities to the property, you got a problem. And the biggest bombs I've seen in the land business are when people got surprised because they thought they did their due diligence and then they found out later, okay, there's not water on it. Mm-hmm. Or there's, oh, wait a minute. There is a power line over there, but I don't have an easement to get to it or something like that. It's usually, that's the thing you'll find out. There's a lot. You better know what the county specifications are.
That's great advice. Eddie, what's your biggest passion or goal you'd like to achieve at this point in your life?
I want to help the next generation in this business learn how to do it and not do it in a way that's not good to people or good to themselves. It's what you've heard me say for the last hour. I'm passionate about people really doing the land business the right way. And I'm not super fired up about some of these gurus that I think tell people shortcuts.
That's really good. That's really good. So if you could go back and teach your younger self, what would be some of the most important lessons that you would say, hey, don't do this, do this?
Learn scientifically how to sell or buy. If you think you're a good negotiator and you don't scientifically know how to do it, you're probably deceiving yourself. If you don't know what the psychological close is and psychological framing, you need to know that. You need to figure it out because that'll make you a lot more money than anything else.
That's fantastic. Eddie, I want to thank you so much for giving to us today and on your birthday. Thank you for spending your birthday evening with us. I feel so honored.
Yeah, no, you can tell I like it, right?
I can absolutely tell. And I just love that you have a heart for giving and your passion for just educating people to do things the right way. It's so refreshing and it's just so inspiring to see. So thank you so much for that. Awesome. How can we give back to you right now? What types of connections or resources you're currently looking to make?
When I do a podcast, I'll offer somebody a masterclass. I don't always give it away. So I'm going to give your audience tonight a masterclass.
Wow.
And that's a couple of hours. And what we're going to do is we're going to move from concept to a lot more tactical. Like we're going to take real deals. We're going to show them real deals. I'm going to show them note investing because I think they need to see that. I'm going to answer a lot of questions. So people like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And stuff. And just if we can do that and I've suggested to people information is way better than experience. It will eliminate experience because we all know what experience is, right? What you get when you're expecting something else.
Yeah, that's good.
So if I can help people with some information, I'm going to cut back on the experience they didn't want. And that's what I'd like to do. That's my birthday present to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. How can we access that masterclass?
Put it in the show notes too. It's notes. If you guys want to write it down, it's noteschool.com/Eddie Masterclass.
Excellent.
And it's about 2 hours. You can go to the website and register. And it's a solid. If you like what I did tonight, you'll like it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and put that in the show notes. And that's extremely generous. Thank you guys so much. Eddie, again, thank you. You've been absolutely remarkable. This has been a true masterclass, and we look forward to learning even more from you with your generous offer. So again, thank you guys so much. Everyone, take care, be safe, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye. If you're interested in hearing from other seven-figure land flippers about how they've started and run their businesses, then join us at onlylandfans.com. Looking forward to seeing you there.